Yes, so we'll start. We're going to have a shear on the 3 weeks, which is the period we're in at the moment. The 3 weeks are the 21 days between Shiva Osab Tammuz, which is the 17th of Tammuz, which is a fast day, and Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which is also a fast day. It's called the period Bein HaBesarim, which is between those two straits, and it is known amongst Jews as a negative period. This is a time when Jews are especially much more careful and circumspect about various things. Travel, business. It's traditionally viewed as not a good time for us. And it becomes a very much worse time for us on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th of Av. But I'll try and do a shear on Tisha B'Av as we get closer to it, but at the moment we should do a shear on the 21 days, on the 3 weeks. And before we do that, I just thought we should revise together a basic perspective, which is difficult, very easy to listen to in words, and much more difficult to process as das, as changing one's real behavior. So the question, let me put the question as blankly as I can. You have 21 days, this period of 3 weeks, which Jews are, I won't say frightened of, but they're very guarded in relation to this 3 weeks. And if you ask somebody why, they will say to you, because it's painful. It's not a good time. It's a time of pain. It's a time of reversal of good fortune. It's a time of stress. And the first question that we really have to master together in this year and in your lives of learning Hasidus, and in terms of your perspective and my perspective, is how can there be such a thing as bad? We believe, let me read you a pasuk from Tillim that everybody knows. We say it in the Hallel, Hoiru ladonoi ki toiv, ki le'olam hasdoi. So I'll translate. Hoiru ladonoi, praise be to Hashem. Now, Hoiru, when you say praise, what we're talking about is a perspective of pure adoration. Why? Because and to whom? To Hashem. Why? Ki tov, because He's good. Now, when we say that Hashem Ki tov, it's not good some of the time. It's not good when He feels like it. It's not good when it's summer. It means that Hashem is good, without qualification, all the time. So that must be infinitely so, because He's God. And then it goes on to say, Ki le'olam hasdoi, because forever, always, back, forward, up, down, always, He is good. He's kind. He's giving. So this God that is all powerful, let's understand, this is our belief system, comes from what Hashem's told us. How do we know that? Because Hashem appeared once in the whole history of creation, since creation, to a multitude of people at once. This only happened once in history. It happened with Am Yisrael. at the time of the giving of the Aseret Hadibros, of the Ten Commandments, Hashem appeared to 3 million souls, 600,000 males, 600,000 females, and their children. And Yoshka says he met God, maybe he did. Muhammad says that he met God, maybe he did. There are all sorts of people in India sitting on mountaintops who smoke and say they see God every time they do. Maybe they do. But we don't know. And we Yidden are very skeptical about this, and we don't know. We just don't believe it. But when Hashem appears to 3 million people, all of whom testified of the same thing, the whole of history repeats this all over the world, wherever Jews have been, when they haven't had any communication with each other for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, people from Iraq to India, to people who've had no communication one with the other, have the same Sefer Torah, which records exactly what happened, exactly what our history is. Now, this God, our God that appeared to Am Yisrael, told us certain things. One of the things that we learn is that Hashem is all good. Now, if he's all good, what about the obvious problem of pain and suffering and difficulty and misery, sickness, disease, all the problems that you and I know about very well? And you and I know that each and every person seems to have to endure his particular cocktail of difficulties throughout his whole life. So when it comes to the 3 weeks and we say, well, this is a particularly difficult time, what does that mean? How can it be that it's a particularly difficult time? And let me tell you, it is. I'm going to read you a Mishnah in a moment which will tell you why it is. So, we have the basic principle that we keep learning about over and over again, that every Yerida is Sorik and Aliyah, that every descent is for the purpose of an ascent. Now, I don't want that to just be a mantra between us. It needs to be understood logically, with ordinary human logic. And the ordinary human logic is this, that if Hashem is all good, and Hashem is controlling everything. We learn that Hashem creates the world not once, but every moment. And that everything that is being created is Gashmis, is physicality. So my fingers, your fingers, the hair on your arm, the hair on your head, the saliva in your mouth, all of that is being recreated every moment, every microsecond. So we have a logical imperative with that. But if Hashem is recreating all of that consciously every moment, he must be controlling it. So if he's controlling it, and that's how we explain Ashgacha Pratis, divine providence, then this control that Hashem is effecting is the life that we live, what is happening to us in our lives. And we learn that Hashem, we've just learned, Hoidul Hashem, ki toiv, ki le'olam masdo. He's always good, always kind. So what about the time when, to our perspective, it's not like that at all? You lose money, you have sickness, you don't have nakas from your children, God forbid. What about those times? So we say, no problem, buddy. Logically, you've got to understand, every Yerid is Sorik and Aliyah. Every descent is for the purpose of ascent. So when you're having the descent, hang on tight, because it'll be over soon, and when it's over, it'll be for the purpose of an ascent. But there's a much deeper logic in that. And the deeper logic in that is this, that if you want, if you want to improve something, there's no point in a reversal of fortune, which we'll come to in a moment, just to bring you back to the same place that you were before. What's achieved by that? You know, you watch a tide coming in. If the tide is only going to come into a point and not go any further, the movement is very suspect. For the movement to be real, it needs to increase and it needs to decrease. We need to have light, we need to have dark, we need to have variations. But those variations must be ultimately for a better position than it was before, otherwise we're wasting everybody's time. What is the point of enduring a Eurida, a descent, even if it's for the purpose of a subsequent ascent, if the subsequent ascent isn't any higher than it was before you started? What is the point? How can there be any logical justification for that? So, until you learn Yurid Tzorik Aliyah, you can be excused for thinking that God's a sadist. Because otherwise, why would he be? If he's controlling everything and he's bringing everything into being every moment, and that entails control, and there are going to be negatives, those negatives, if they are only negatives, not for the purpose of an aliyah, for an ascent, then God's being cruel. Not only is Kilei Olam Hazdoi, that forever he's kind and good, but he's being actually cruel. So you say, well, he can't be being absolutely cruel because every Yerida must be Tzorik and Aliyah. Okay, so let's say that. But then you've still got the problem that if the Aliyah is still only back to the place you were before, what's the point? What's the point of putting you through it? Isn't that cruelty as well? Let's say that he doesn't keep the bad, and you learn to grow from the bad into back to where you were before. Still, it's a waste of time. So it is deep, clear logic that if you accept the first steps, that there is a God and that the God is creating everything and that he's all good, then it must be that if you want to learn Yurid Tzorik Aliyah, the Aliyah has to be to a place higher than it was before you started.
But how do you know that it is a higher level?
Okay, so if you can keep the questions till later, because I'll try and deal with it. It's a good question and it's central to what we're talking about. But I will not be able to concentrate. So, and some of this is hard, you know. The point that I'm trying to make at the moment is that it's not enough to learn Yurid Tzorik Aliyah. You have to be able to see, as a matter of personal clarity, that the Aliyah must be to a higher level than it was before. So there must be a potential to go higher, better, grow stronger than you were before you had the setback. So that the setback can suddenly be viewed as purposeful for your growth. Now that's a very easy perspective to get to logically if you want to work this through according to the methodology that I've just been through, which is how the Rebbe learns. But it's a very difficult thing to apply to yourself when you're in pain. When you're in pain, and you know, the worst thing you can possibly do is when someone else is in pain to start giving him all this philosophy. When someone else is in pain, you've got to put your arm around him and help him. Give him some money, give him whatever help he needs. Not give him philosophy. But when you and I are in pain for ourselves, now you've got to get this very clear, that this is for oneself. Then one has to ask the question, why is this happening? And if it's happening, and if we believe that Hoidul Hashem ki tov ki leo elam mazdoi, that he's only good and always kind, then it must be for my benefit. If it must be for my benefit, the only question is how. And not only understanding is the only question how, but there needs to be a certainty, an absolute certainty in your bones that it's not only for your benefit, but for your benefit to get to a place of growth better than you were before you had the problem. And this is a partnership in perspective between you and your God. And it's a totally different life with this perspective. One way of life is existing, and one way of life is living. So the person who exists gets up in the morning, and it's a fair statement, gets up in the morning and he thinks, how many bullets do I have to dodge today, right? How many bank managers bank managers don't have any power anymore, but when I was a young man, they used to have power. How many bullets am I going to have to dodge? How many crooks am I going to have to overcome? Who's lying? Who's cheating me? What do I have to check? Who's raiding my, today with all this stuff with the computers and raiding your bank accounts and emptying it out, there's no principle of right and wrong. There's only who can get away with what. So you get up in the day and you're shivering from morning till night to try and avoid the problems that you've got, whether they're financial or your kids or your partner or whatever it is. That's one way of living, and that's existing, and that's how most people do exist. But if you really understand the dynamic that we've just been through, that there is God, and God is only good, and God is recreating everything every moment, so therefore he's controlling everything that's happening to you. Therefore, what's happening to you is for your benefit and your growth, and the growth is going to be to a higher place than it was before. Now let's have a look at your day. Now, everything that's served up to you by your God, because you're so certain it's for your benefit, the only question is how to deal with it and how to get the benefit. And now every day becomes an exciting opportunity for achievement, and that's living rather than existing. Now you may say, well, how many people really live like that? Let me tell you, plenty. Not plenty numerically, because first of all, of the 8.5 billion nefashos on this planet, we Israel are what, 16 million to Alavai, 15 million, yeah, 15 million. 15 million and 8.5 billion. So we're talking about a ridiculous fraction. And in little Yisrael, in that 15 million people, unfortunately, most of them don't learn properly anymore. So because of that, most of them have joined the ranks of the Gentile life and live the life of shivering every time they get up in the morning, compared to the Jew who gets up in the morning, who says Moedei Ani, who washes Nagel Vasa, who goes and makes the morning brachas and concentrates thanking Hashem for every single thing that we do in our brachas, and then go out and meet the day a gladiator. A gladiator to deal with the issues that are served up to him. Why? Because he wants to succeed in those challenges for the benefit of the world and for his community, his family, and ultimately also himself. Now, if that is your perspective, and I'd love to be part of getting you there, and we do it by repetition. You go to the spiritual gym, you have to keep learning the same thing over and over and over again until it becomes das. But having said that, a man with this perspective, give him that perspective, how can we have a period of 21 days where he says this is a terrible time? How can it be? How does that sit with what we've just learned? So the answer is that it isn't a good time, in the sense that there is pain, And it isn't a good time in the sense that not everybody has learned how to live. And the best thing that can happen out of the 21 days is that we do learn how to live with the 21 days and do understand how those 21 days are an opportunity not for pain, but for resultant growth. And then the 21 days become a Yerida Tzorik and Aliyah which is worthwhile because you've grown to a place higher than you were before the 21 days. So, L'chaim. Now we get some hints about this in Nigla, in Revealed Torah, before we get to Chassidus. Where are they? It says this. It says that when Mashiach comes, the fast days will be converted to yontifs. Will become our big yontif, and the biggest yontif will be Tisha B'Av. Let's try and understand these words. You know, Torah is endlessly deep. There are no lies, there are no contradictions, there are no exaggerations. So how can the Gemara say that these fast days are going to be the Yom Tovim or replace our Yom Tovim, and the biggest yontif is going to be the biggest yontif is going to be Tisha B'Av. So the answer is this: that it's not enough that the pain will be removed from the fast day so that we don't have to fast anymore. Why? Because that would be a Yerida only to get to the place of a normal day. Then the Yerida's been a waste of time. So it's got to be to a higher place. There's got to be a profit. Otherwise, there's no sense in the investment. Now, I'm going to read you another piece of Torah. Oh, I probably won't read it. I'll probably just say it outside. In the Mishnah, this is the Mishnah Tainus. It's for those who want to look it up. It's in chapter 4 and it's Halacha 6. It says 5 calamities befell our ancestors. I hate this English translation. It's a very old English translation. Anyway, five calamities affected us on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. And these are the 5. I'm going to read you the 5. I'll say them outside. The 5 are that, first of all, the first luchos were broken. The first tablets were broken. Secondly, it says bottle with the korban tomid. The korban tomid, I'll explain in a minute, was nullified because of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Third thing was that the walls of Yerushalayim were finally breached. I'll go through all of these separately. The fourth one was that Apostamos, who was a Roman, burned a Sefer Torah in front of everybody. And the fifth one was that an idol was brought into the Heichel, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, into the holiest place in the... So these are 5 negative events which the Mishnah says is the reason for this bad time in the 3 weeks. And we celebrate, we remember these 5 things in the 3 weeks to remember that you've got to remember this is a bad time because you did this, right? You allowed this to happen. And that's how people learn superficially, that Hashem is a big, tough schoolmaster waving his finger at you. And if you don't behave, I'm going to beat the hell out of you. And you have to know that that is absolutely alien to Yiddishkeit. This is stuff that's been brought in from other religions, from Christianity, and I know the tape's on, but that's the reality. The concept of heaven and hell and the barbecue of people when they've gone wrong. We don't learn like this. Hashem isn't a big, cruel headmaster. He's a loving father who is structuring our environment for our benefit and for our growth. So when these 5 things have happened, it's something to lament, but not to lament just groan, because groaning doesn't help, but to work with, to understand how, if those things can be, if one can grow through tshuva of those things, then one will grow to a place higher than it was before it was necessary for Hashem to have us go through those 5 things. So let's start with the luchos. The first of those things was that the first of the luchos were broken. Everyone knows the story. Hashem appears to Am Yisrael on Har Sinai. He says that Am Yisrael says, 10 commandments, we've had enough. Moshe, you've got to listen. Hashem says, come on up into Shemaim, come on up to Har Sinai. And he goes up for 40 days and 40 nights. He doesn't eat, he doesn't drink, and that has very deep spiritual connotations, meaning that he has a very slender grasp on Gashmias and a very strong grasp on Ruchnias. And then at the end of that time, he comes down with the luchos, with the tablets that Hashem made. And the luchos, by the way, have the Aseret Dibros, the 10 Commandments, engraved. They're oisius hakika, which means they're engraved letters rather than oisius aksiva, written. They're written. If you have something written, you have ink or whatever it is on paper. Ink is one entity, paper is one entity. You put them together and you have a fusion of the two at some level. But they're 2 separate items. When you engrave something, when you engrave the letters into the stone, into the sapphire as it was, there's no separate entity combining with a separate entity. The stone is the letter is the stone. So that, by the way, is a huge hint for us to understand that the Torah needs to be engraved on our neshama, not just written on our neshama. To sit and learn Torah it's very important. You have to do it. But much more than sitting and learning Torah, it needs to be engraved on your very essence. Now, what happens if that engravement on your essence is broken? What happens if it's broken? And we have an incredible piece of Torah where Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, when he's telling him to make the second set of luchos, he says, basically says, Asher Koyach for breaking the first luchos, and go ahead and make the second luchos. And the question is, and he says that you broke. He says, Asher Koyach on breaking on the first luchos that you broke, and now make the second luchos. And the question is, why does he say that you broke? Is he shtekking him? Is Hashem shtekking Moshe Rabbeinu? He's Rebbe, he's Rebbe of the generation, the Moshe Rabbeinu of Am Yisrael forever. As for Shalom, he's not shtekking him. He's telling it. He's saying a truth and you have to understand that this breaking of the luchos is a huge puzzle in itself. We don't really have time for it tonight, but I'll just sketch it in for you very quickly, because he's walking down with the tablets, and he sees Am Yisrael worshipping the golden cow, the golden calf. And this worshipping of the golden calf is a Cecil B. DeMille scandal on its own. There was total sexual profligacy, there was total moral turpitude, stealing, every moral issue. We just had the 10 Commandments, and all of a sudden, within 40 days, they are behaving as though there was no such thing. They witnessed nothing. And Moshe Rabbeinu is absolutely devastated, so he smashes the luchos. Now I want to ask you a question. Who gave him permission to smash the luchos? Let's start with it. Who do the luchos belong to?
Jewish people.
Jewish people. So if they belong to the Jewish people, what right has he got to break them? Or you can say that they really belong to Hashem because Hashem made them. Again, you have the same question. Who gives him the right? If they belong, nowhere is it written that they belong to Moshe Rabbeinu. So if they don't belong to Moshe Rabbeinu, what right has he got to smash them? He doesn't like them, give them back.
Accidentally.
Bury them, hide them from Am Yisrael. But who gives him the right to break them? And Hashem says Hashakoyach to him for breaking them. Why? And then those splintered pieces that are broken, they're all gathered up, and we learn later on that there's a piece of furniture thing called the Aron HaKodesh, which we learn about separately. And in the Aron HaKodesh were placed the second set of luchos. But also in the Aron HaKodesh were placed the fragments of the first set of luchos. Why? Why would you take the holiest place and receptacle for Am Yisrael to live the rest of their destiny until Mashiach comes and remind them of how they behaved, that the luchos had to be broken? Why? So the answer is that in the breakage, in the actual breakage, a person has an opportunity to leap forward. And that, unfortunately, we don't understand God's ways. Our ways are not God's ways. That we learn this over and over again. Hashem somehow or other designed the world in such a way that Yerida is necessary for an Aliyah. There's no such thing as an Aliyah without a Yerida. If you guys want to test this, and you go for your walk or whatever you do, the gym or whatever you do, and you're thinking, and you spend some time thinking about your life, you will see that every growth, every advantage that you've reaped in your life has been a result of first a descent. There's no such thing. The Malachim, there's a very interesting thing. When Yaakov has his dream with the ladder, it says that the angels are going up and down the ladder. Right? Malachim go up and down. We don't go up and down. We go down and up. We go down. The Yerida, Historic, and Aliyah higher than we were before. And why Hashem said Ashakoyach for the broken luchos was that here is a palpable piece of education for Am Yisrael, that their growth comes from the whole luchos, no question, that's why they're in the Aron, but also they start from the broken luchos. And real growth can only start from the broken luchos. Okay, all Torah, like everything in creation, has a gufen and a neshama, a body and a soul. We learn that Nigla, revealed Torah, learning Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha, that is the guf, that's the body of Torah. The soul of Torah is learning Hasidus and Kabbalah. So the soul of this Mishnah with the 5 things is that actually these are the 5 pathways out of personal pain. These 5 things represent the 5 pathways of converting that 21-day negative into ultimately, when Mashiach comes, a period of Yom Tov. Now, the Luchos is the beginning point. The first thing to understand is that there are going to be times in your and my life when we are poshet broken. And there are many ways that result from of how you can be after a breakage, especially a serious breakage. You know, you can if you break a knee and you go to a knee surgeon and all he does is restore your knee to the condition it was before, alavai, you're very grateful, but you've had a whole lot of pain in the meantime and physiotherapy and all you've done is got to where you were before. But if he gives you a better knee, if the knee that you had before was a bad knee for years and years and years, and he gives you a new knee and suddenly you've got no pain, you've got total flexibility, you can now run in the Sydney to surf, you've got a different level of knee. These 5 things we're going to see are the soul of how to have an aliyah higher than the Yerida that you had before. That's why I needed some time to get to this. So let's go through them one by one. We've just done the luchos which were broken. And the engraved letters are broken. Not that it gets rubbed out, which is a superficial thing, but the actual engraved letters are broken. So it can happen to a man to understand that he's totally broken about something. There are some things that are so serious to you that you feel totally broken to the actual engraved letters on your soul. But it has to be available to you, whether by learning and going to the spiritual gym, to understand that brokenness is in itself going to be in the Aron with the second set of luchos. And the second set of luchos are actually inferior. Why? Because they were engraved by Moshe Rabbeinu, whereas the first luchos were engraved by God. So the broken luchos have to have a place of preciousness in your life to understand that that's something raw material to work with, for it to be better. Okay, let's go to the second one, which is Bittul Korban Tomid. Now, let me explain what that is. We have in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, we had korbanos, offerings. One of those offerings, I'll try and make this quick, was called a Korban Tomid. What was the Korban Tomid? It was the bringing of a sheep or a lamb in the morning and in the evening. Chakras and Mincha. Every day. 365 and a quarter days a year, every day, every chakras, every mincha. Yom Kippur, Shabbos, every day. That was called the Korban Tomid. And there's an argument, there's a very interesting argument in the Talmud which asks this apparently nonsensical question. What's the most important pasuk in the Torah? That's the question that they ask. So there are 4 Hakamim there. It's really, when that's destroyed, like it was with the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, a Jew loses a backbone. It's not a backbone for strength, it's a backbone for solidity, for security. It's a keel under a boat. Everybody needs that, and when one is suffering, one has to go back to that, because usually it's been relaxed in some way or another. Now, the third thing, excuse me, the walls were breached on the 17th of Tammuz, the walls of Yerushalayim. Let me tell you, Yerushalayim wasn't conquered on the 17th of Tammuz, the walls were breached. And this breach took place after 6-7 months of fighting. They were besieging Yerushalayim for months and months and months, and there's a whole account in the Talmud of what went on and how somebody was smuggled out to Yavne, the whole thing. But finally, the walls were breached on the 17th of Tammuz. What does this mean for you and me? We learn that we need boundaries. Jews need boundaries. For us, there's no such thing as woke, and there's no such thing as fluid genders. There's no such thing as fluid morality. Our morality is really very simple. What's Ratzon Hashem is good, and what is not Ratzon Hashem is bad. There's a very easy way to define it. You know, there are philosophers who've argued for hundreds of years on what's good and bad. And the result is Nazi Germany. And that in Nazi Germany, it was very easy to make an argument for killing 1,500 children a day as their quota. Because if you accept all the Jews are evil and then murder's all right. You're actually doing everybody a service. Now, we learn that good equals behaving consistently with Ratzon Hashem, bad equals behaving inconsistency with Ratzon Hashem. And there have to be boundaries for that. There need walls to protect it. When we have halakha, we have walls around our halakhas. So for example, let's take we're learning together adult men, believing, I'm sure, as each of us do, that we're sophisticated, 21st century, intelligent men. So what is a boundary for somebody less intelligent, less sophisticated? May not apply to us. So, for example, it's forbidden to touch a woman who is not your wife, okay? Or a child. Let's leave children out of it for the moment. It's forbidden. So, if you're French and sophisticated, or if you're Australian and watch a French movie and you're sophisticated, you see that everybody kisses each other on each cheek. Every man kisses every woman on each cheek. And if you dare to say that is a problem because of the defense that we have for our halakhas of smears, then you're shouted down as a Neanderthal. You're shouted down as a person that has no sophistication. Oh, what are you talking about? And who's, I don't want to mention his name because he'll know what I'm talking about. But I had a teacher, and you're not allowed to touch a woman who's not. So religious Jews don't shake hands with women. It's become a very difficult problem.
Yeah.
Because in modern business society, every woman that walks into the room strides across the room with her hand outstretched. So, and you really, you can really hurt a woman if you refuse to hold it. And some women have invented the myth that religious Jews don't do it because if she is in the middle of her period, she's tomei and unclean, and a Jewish man doesn't want to be dirty. So and it becomes a whole negative story. So I used to learn with a guy in Melbourne who was, I believe, very clever. He's dead never for a long time now, and I witnessed this happen. We were in yeshiva, and one of the government people who came to check up on something came in, And he was put in charge of looking after this lady. And she walked in and she stuck out her hand and said, and he said, I can't. And she looked very suspicious, and he said, I'm very worried that I will jump you the moment I touch you. And she said, oh, really? Really? Would you be worried about that? And she was never so flattered. But the principle is there that we, and it's difficult to navigate, it's difficult to negotiate, but we can't. That's one of the fences. We have fences around many groups of mitzvahs. And those fences are very important. And if you breach those walls, you become vulnerable to the very problem that you started out to protect. So if you have the belief system that there is a set of, there are rules for sexual morality, for example, and that you can't have intercourse with your sister if you're a male, then you can't kiss your sister.
Yeah.
It's a problem. Because if you're going to be kissing your sister and say, oh, but you know, I'm not from the dark ages, we're sophisticated people. But the reality is that the person that is kissing the sister, sooner or later, somebody somewhere is going to fail. So in order not to fail, we have walls, we have fences. And those fences can't be breached. And if they're breached, it's grounds for remorse. It's grounds for deep remorse. And that's why it's included in one of the 5 things that happened Shavas or B'Tammuz, that the walls of Yerushalayim were breached. Now, and the ideas of the Sefer Torah. The ideas of the Sefer Torah you can't burn. You can't burn ideas. You can burn a person for what he says or what he does, but you can't burn his ideas. You can burn him for having those ideas, but you can't burn the idea. And we need to know that Am Yisrael have a set of ideas which, no matter how the Gentile population want to burn it, and I mean, you can see what's going on. This shouldn't have any political content. It's a shir on Torah, but yeah, my wife watches these things on YouTube, all these commentators, and tonight she was telling me that one of the famous ones, whoever he is, was saying that if in the next couple of weeks, if this situation in Lebanon explodes, there will be no Israel. Now, you know, you can have the fact that there is no, that Am Yisrael Chai and that the land is ours is an idea, is an idea that no commentator on television can burn. Can't burn that idea. It may be that we have setbacks. It may be that whatever it'll be. And I mean, that's not what our Rebbe taught us. We're living in times of Mashiach, etc., etc. And Am Yisrael Chai, then we're not going to be subject to Hezbollah or anybody else. But that has to be a conscious idea that we know that they can burn all they like, but they're not burning our souls and they're not burning our ideas. And then finally, there is this issue of the 5th thing that we're suffering from, is that they brought an idol into the Kodesh, into the Heichel, into the holiest place in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, I watched, as I was walking through, I watched on Sunday afternoon, Anne watches this stuff on Israel all the time. And there's somebody called Pierce somebody, he has these debates. Pierce somebody, right?
Yeah.
And he was having this debate on on something or other, but what he was really doing was advising, or the people on the show. There was one guy it was made up of 4 boxes of debaters, and one of them was a Yid living in Canada. And Nebuch, this Yid, talked like the worst anti-Semite I've ever seen, and it's so painful to listen. We said 15 million people amongst 8.5 billion nefashos, and we can't even be together, Am Yisrael, without somebody being an anti-Semite, a Jewish anti-Semite. Who needs this? And this guy was bringing an idol into the Heichel. That's what he was doing. He was sitting there and trashing Am Yisrael, trashing Israel, trashing everything we stand for and live for and have lived for, and why we shouldn't exist. The Rebbe has a very long Farbrengen on anti-Semitism, and he explains in that Farbrengen, I'm sure we've done it in the Shir before, but and he explains in the Farbrengen that there's no reason for anti-Semitism. It is a spiritual negative force to correspond against the fact that we're an Am Segula for, and we got the job of introducing Ruchnius into Gashmius on Har Sinai, and in opposition to that there has to be a force for the negative, and that force is anti-Semitism. And the Rebbe explains that it's a virus, and if you try and get rid of that virus, it morphs. It's not race. It's not that Jews are an inferior race. That didn't work. The rest of the world's anti-racist at the moment. So what happened to the virus? All of a sudden, it's human rights. We are the anti-human rights. Am Yisrael, who stood for nothing but human rights throughout history, who ignored the Crusades and ignored all the Khmelnytskys and sat and learned Torah, and we have no record of murder or child abuse or marital abuse that we're seeing with every second footballer at the moment. We have no record of that. All of a sudden, Am Yisrael is anti-human rights. We are the antithesis of human rights. So that's what happens when you allow a Heichel into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. You don't listen to this stuff. You can't. So let's summarize. We have a Mishnah which says 5 things happened on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz until the 9th of Av. And by the way, there are 5 things. The Mishnah goes on to say that there are 5 things with the 9th of Av. We'll maybe do that next time we do Tisha B'Av. But these 5 things are actually the soul of what this dynamic is. This dynamic is that there is a God who is all powerful, all good, bringing you and me the Hashgacha Pratis that each and every one of us individually needs, equipping us with the koikus, the powers to deal with those things. Otherwise, it would be cruelty to give us those tests if we can't. What's the good of getting a guy with 2 broken legs to run in the city to surf? If you're going to run in the city to surf, a parent of the child who's going to run in the city to surf, make sure that the child has the capability of running through the city to surf, not has broken legs. So if Hashem gives you and me a test, it's because you and me are the only people who can deal with that test. And we have to have the equipment to deal with that test. And if you get that follows, then the next thing to get is that there are these 5 things which make us feel pain. When we are fragmented, when the lukos, our lukos, we are the lukos, when those lukos are broken and stay fragmented without understanding that you've got a partner in the aron of the full lukos, then that's going to stop you living a life and stop you growing. And the same and same thing with the Korban Tomid. If you need to realize that you have to have a level of constancy, trust, that you can be trusted, your word can be trusted, your behavior can be trusted. You don't go wrong. If you go wrong, you go wrong and you do tshuva. That there have to be boundaries. You know, I had a teacher once, he still is in Sydney, and he gave me the mashal once of somebody that went to Bali, and he said that when he goes to Bali, there's no one in the world that knows where he is. He's completely free. He can go where he likes, he can do what he likes. There's no one watching, no one knowing. And my teacher explained to me at the time that that isn't freedom. What does it mean? It means that nobody cares about him. Nobody gives a damn about him. Nobody cares where he is. What sort of freedom is that? That's a fool's freedom. We need walls around and boundaries. Just to walk around and think you're free because you've got no boundaries, that's for an idiot. And then if there is an apostomos around you who is burning the ideas that you and I learn together, you've got to know that it's only the goof that's being burned. The ideas aren't burned. And finally, you cannot allow other people to trafe up our heichel, to bring their sullied ideas into your life, and you welcome them and give space to them. That's no good. And we learn from our Rebbe that if a person is careful with these 5 things, he does grow from all of these things. Is the negative not going to be there? It is going to be there. We learn that it is. Shiva Asa B'Tammuz to the 9th of is a difficult time. But it's only a difficult time as it is presented to us. It's not a difficult time if you realize that it can be used to work with that to make a result higher than it was before you started. So it's easier said than done, guys. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Robert, what's the actual date of Shiva?
17 till the 9th of Av.
Today's the 24th of Tammuz.
Yes.
Yes.
So we have a short.
We've already had a week.
I don't know that's all right.
There's
2 weeks.
A few arrangements
That's all right.
with
Yes, so we'll start. We're going to have a shear on the 3 weeks, which is the period we're in at the moment. The 3 weeks are the 21 days between Shiva Asa B'Tammuz, which is the 17th of Tammuz, which is a fast day, and Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which is also a fast day. It's called the period Bein HaBesarim, which is between those 2 straits, and it is known amongst Jews as a negative period. This is a time when Jews are especially